About July 8, 2013, not many people in Nashville talk about a certain event. The real one, not the catchy title or the motivational one. It was Sunday. In Plano, Texas, Randy Travis was taken to the Heart Hospital Baylor. Doctors first thought it was viral cardiomyopathy, which is a heart bug. Very bad, but curable. He had been weak for a long time. Music, I'm out of breath and sweating a lot. There was a problem. By afternoon, he was in terrible shape. His lungs were full of fluid. His blood pressure became unsteady and his heart weakened quickly. His body could no longer do the work that the machines were doing. That night, sometime, a neurosurgeon told Mary Davis something that no one is ever fully ready for. He most likely won't talk again if he lives. Don't sing, talk. The stroke came on quickly. Huge part of his left brain, which is also in charge of speech. It wasn't known yet on country radio. Fans didn't know. The business world as a whole didn't know. But there was already quiet sadness in that hospital room. It's weird in Nashville. It doesn't scream when crises happen, it waits. Calls are made. The sounds of managers are low. Lawyers ask important questions that no one wants to hear. It was said that one producer asked if insurance plans were up to date, not mean, just realistic. At the same time, Randy did nothing. He was 54 years old, which was too young for this story. By midnight, doctors put the person into a coma. They had to get his brain to stop growing. They should have given him a chance. One doctor told Mary straight out, "Your chances of surviving were very low." Another advised her to plan for possible long-term care situations. It wasn't being talked about anymore. That's important because Randy Travis wasn't just another artist. By 2013, he had changed current country music more than once. In 1986, more than 3 million copies of Storms of Life had been sold. He brought the style back to its roots when it was leaning toward pop gloss. Alan Jackson has said in public that Randy is what kept country music alive. That name stuck out in that hospital room. Strokes don't matter to fame, though. Later, Mary talked about those hours as if time had stopped. She talked about machines, monitors, a ventilator, and the slow rise and fall of his chest that was helped by machines. Not many people knew this, and it's not often talked about, but Rhee's health had been bad before this. The charges in 2012, the case of public intoxication in Sanger, Texas, and the mugshot that went viral. There was stress from the law, exhaustion, and damage to their image. However, that did not lead to the stroke. However, nothing happens in a vacuum. By early July 9 morning, family members were being called in a quiet way. When you get this kind of phone call, there are more silences than words. That was one of them. Doctors said surgery might not help if the swelling got worse. They talked about the do not resuscitate choices carefully, politely, and clinically. People who liked the country song Forever and Ever Amen that week didn't know. There is no pause on the radio for private breakdown. As soon as the news spread in Nashville, people began to respond. Short comments, prayers, and lifting him up. The country legend is in the hospital. But there was something else, music, behind those safe words. Not knowing. Because Randy had already been through a public fall that everyone could see. DUIs, arrests, and close inspection. In private, some people wondered if his body had just hit its limit. That thought never made the news, but it did exist. At the same time, the coma lasted for almost 3 days in Texas. Randy didn't wake up. Mary stayed, but not as a public figure or a spokesman. She stayed to see if the man she loved would ever come back. Late on July 10, brain activity started to show signs. Small moves and reflexes. Doctors said it was cautiously positive and early. It wasn't just survival in the next task. It caused harm. Stroke in the left hemisphere, serious aphasia, and possible motor impairment. When he finally opened his eyes later, the first efforts to talk did not work. There were words there, but they were badly put together. Think about that. A man whose name had been linked to one of the most famous baritones in American music was broken up into pieces. When it comes to the man, no one talks much about what that does inside. And the sad thing at that time wasn't that country music might lose a voice. The fear was that Randy Travis would wake up and find that he was still living but not himself. In the end, the headlines would become encouraging. But that room didn't make me feel good. It was cold, unsure, and heavy. Along with the silence, a question was beginning to form that the doctor could not answer. What's left if the voice never comes back? Randy Travis wasn't happy when he woke up from his sleep for long. Being back wasn't the same as being living. The language center on the left side of his brain was hurt by the stroke. Serious aphasia was confirmed by doctors. His right side wasn't moving much. His right arm didn't move much. His voice was barely there. He was going to say something. That was the mean part. He still had a mind. It was stuck. The first few weeks were hard to follow. He tried to make music words, but all that came out was air. Then there was a noise, then anger, and then nothing. The nurses also saw something else. I was tired very quickly. 20 minutes of standing up felt like hours. Therapy began right away. Every day there is physical therapy, exercise therapy, music therapy, and speech therapy. There were no cameras or soft music to encourage people in the background. Just saying it again. Raise your arm. Don't let go. Try once more with the word. There's something else that not many people talk about. At first, getting better after a major stroke isn't dramatic. It works by itself. You are not looking for meaning. You are looking for movement. When they first started seeing a therapist, they would point to pictures. Say the word. He wasn't always able to hum. Mary later said that there were days when he shut down, wouldn't try, and turned his head away, but it wasn't because he was mad. It was because he was tired. Imagine having built your whole job on being able to control your voice and your emotions, and all of a sudden you can't. Some people thought the curve would be a miracle. There are a lot of happy endings in country music. This wasn't a clean rise after a fall, which is what we like. Many months went by in rehab centers. Outside, things kept going. There were new acts. Hits played on the radio. There were award shows without him. He watched parts of it on TV by himself. Isolation is one of the most ignored parts of getting better after a stroke. It's not physical, music is mental. Friends and other artists came to visit. They weren't always good kids. How do you normally talk? Do you break down words? Do you try not to talk about music? Some people talked too much. Some people didn't say anything. Randy looked at it. Sometimes he looked angry, and sometimes he had a sense of humor that he couldn't put into words. Then, during a speech practice, something strange happened. A therapist told him to sing instead of talking, not to act, just to try. Music and words are processed in the brain in different ways. Melody can sometimes get around broken speech, music, paths. Neurologists have known this for a long time. First there was just air moving, then a tone. Not strong or clear, but something you know. Everyone in the room was shocked. He couldn't say whole words, but he could understand music. The paths were not damaged. They were taken off track. That moment changed everything. Not in public, not in a big way, inside the company. Therapy was changed. They used him words and church lines that he knew from growing up in Marshville as tools. And this is where a small change happened. Before the stroke, shows were made out of music. It was now time to talk. There's a change. When you act, you look more than yourself. You reach across when you talk to someone. Things moved slowly. By the end of 2014, he could walk short distances with help. His speaking was better, but it was still stuttering. Everyone had to be patient during conversations. The media sometimes talked about a possible comeback. People in the business asked him in a low voice if he would ever go on tour again. Doctors never thought of healing in that way. This is how they put it together. How much freedom can we give him? That's not very exciting. Independence is not a trend. At the same time, something else was happening. Mary was more than just a partner. From Rhee's inside world to the outside world, she became his champion, translator, and interpreter. They got married in March 2015. The time was important. This wasn't a wedding where work was the main focus. Inside the limits, it was commitment. Friends said it was steady, the music was private, and it wasn't exciting. There was discipline behind that stability as well. Recovery from a stroke isn't a mental boost. It's work that was planned. Do exercises in the morning, speech drills, repeat things, and rest. And it wasn't the bodily changes that were the hardest. It was about identity. Who is Randy Travis if he can't play one note on stage and make everyone quiet? No news conferences were held to answer that. There were no in-depth conversations that explained it clearly. Just a guy in therapy learning that making progress might mean writing a whole line without stopping. In the history of country music, he was once called the man who gave the genre new depth. Now gravity came in a different form, the weight of having to learn everything all over again. And now for something most people have never thought about. What if going silent wasn't the sad part? What if you lost more than just the thing itself when you realized how much of yourself it held? He wasn't the same person after recovery. It told him what he had to do to change. And one day, that version would walk out on stage again. But not to come back and prove something less loud. October 16, 2016. Induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Music City. The plan for that night didn't start with Randy in mind. Other people were inducted, speeches were given, and acts were put on. But everyone knew what people were really waiting for. The stroke happened 3 years ago. It's been 3 years since the coma, and not much is known. Something changed when Randy walked in the room. Not loud or showy, just drawing your attention. In the big old Opry House, you could feel it. He walked slowly with Mary close by to help him. Some people in the crowd stood right away, while others hesitated because they weren't sure if the applause would make them feel happy or sad. The business no longer knew how to present him because of that tension. Randy Travis had been the steady center, the conservative, and the voice that sounded older than it was before 2013. He was different by 2016. Clear signs of weakness. His message was well thought out and short. The room was quiet in a way that wasn't respect when he took the mic. It made me feel safe. He started to talk. Words came slowly, and the music was broken up and hard to follow. The work that went into making each sound was clear on his face. There was no one in the room who needed him to do a great job. But there was still something that wasn't said. Would he try? If you're known for a certain voice and change it, going up to the microphone is risky. Then it took place. There was a pause after he finished his speech, which was incomplete but sincere. There was no statement or cue from the band. Randy put his chin up against the mic and started to sing. Wonderful Beauty. The first word wasn't very strong, but the second one was. The crowd was gasping for air by the time he got to the end of the line. It wasn't about pitch. It wasn't about being strong. Yes, it was praise. It was still there in the muscles.